Welcome to Conscious Eye, living in authentic connection and harmony with self, others, and the world. Featuring Ravi and Savitri. Good
Ah,
morning, Ravi.
good morning, Savitri.
We've been recording for a little while, and you know how you get? It's almost like you're in a giddy mood, and everything is lighthearted and fun. So I
Just
look
being
forward.
silly.
Mhm.
Yeah, just letting some silly come through.
You know what else is coming through? This is our 10th episode.
Oh, yes. Okay, that's exciting.
Right. It is. Now, so we'll just imagine fireworks and bells and whistles and ribbons and all these things.
Balloons, confetti.
Confetti. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. 10, our 10th episode. And today it's about insight and intuition.
Insight and intuition. If you heard a bell, that's Darcy telling me that she wants to go out on the deck.
Well, that also is happening at my house, although one's already out there. And it must be time of the day.
Intuition tells me she's going to have to wait.
Okay. Insight probably is right there. Otherwise, she may take a little journey somewhere.
No, but we talked about shadow work last time, and
Yes.
I think insight and intuition kind of go work with that, at least in my experience. Um, because I didn't trust my intuition for a very, very long time, most of my life. And I didn't realize that until quite recently, and you know, more recently than I'd like to admit. How about you?
You know, I think that you're onto something there because we don't learn how to use our intuition. And as you were talking about it taking time for you to really begin to trust it, I don't even know how many times in my life, from the time I was a child onward, people would say, "How do you know that? Where are the facts? How can you prove that? Where did you learn that again? Who told you that?" And it's all external. The questioning was around external sources. And so I don't know how you grew up. You've talked about it a little bit, but I grew up where the external world was really important. The internal world maybe wasn't recognized, but certainly was not supported or allowed to evolve and grow and develop. So, in an ancestral way, I thought I would break some of that karma, perhaps, and attempted to help my children rely on their intuition. And watching them develop and grow through that way of being, I think brought what you were saying to me, where I began to trust a little bit more of my own intuition. Now, I'm not sure why I went that way in one of the things that happened as a parent with my children. It just felt right. So maybe intuitively, I was
Mhm.
taking that into a way of being in the family. Caused some interesting times. We got to the point where we were uh, understanding each other at a different level, and sometimes in a way that we really didn't need to verbalize a lot. Doesn't mean we were mind reading or anything like that. I don't want anyone to go down that path. But in some ways, it was an intuitive alignment in that we were in the same environment, so things were coming through in a similar way.
But I agree with you. We don't, not only do we not spend a lot of time teaching uh, young folks how to listen to or hear or experience their own intuition, a lot of times we literally turn it off. So I remember I've mentioned before, always been a very upper triangle
Mm-hmm.
human being.
Mm-hmm.
I always felt connected to source.
Mm-hmm.
And I was raised in a very conservative Christian background, church. And I always felt connected to God, to source. That was never a question for me. And yet I was raised in an environment teaching me that I was, separate from God or separating myself from God, and I had to do certain things to align with God. And it just never made sense to me. But what it did was dampen my own intuition.
Mm.
So growing up and then into adulthood now and into the place where I am in my life now, I can look back and I can see so many times when I was hearing my intuition, I was feeling my intuition, but instead of tuning into it, listening to it, acting on it, and actually trusting it, I was tuning it out and
Mm-hmm.
making other decisions because of what I thought I should do based on, what I was raised to believe I should do.
Yeah.
And that was a messy path, let me tell you.
Well,
And
yeah.
so learning to tune into, I think we're very often hearing or feeling or sensing our intuition, but not only are we not taught to tap into it, very often we're taught to dampen it or to tune out or to turn it off entirely. And that's when we end up in situations that are not meant for us, that are not beneficial for us, that are not going to lead to a preferred outcome for us.
Right. Yeah. And the intuition is really the voice of the soul. And being in touch with that, our inner light, our Atman, lots of language, God, all of that brings us into alignment. Um, and you mentioned the dampening, and uh, yes, it can be even more than that. Turning it off, certainly. Where does it intersect with an external existence? And often I think that our intuition is a pathway to our shadow self. It's also a pathway to our dharma and a pathway to moksha, which you mentioned because of the connection with the divine. The other thing about it, though, is that when we aren't trusting our intuition, we have self doubt, which then erodes our confidence because we're always second guessing what our soul voice, our intuition, is trying to help us hear. And when we talk about having low self esteem or not a sense of agency and all of those terms that we put to that, when we get down to it, it has to do with the open quality of trust with our intuition. So, what do you think about that as being a source for a lot of the ways that we live our lives, either with courage and trust or with doubt and
Mhm. I think it's spot on. I can, I would say the most impactful personal experience I have, uh, when I ignored my gut. So for me, oftentimes my intuition manifests in a gut experience, right?
yeah.
If
Mhm.
if something is not meant for me, it's really in my solar plexus, and I'm just really feeling that tightening, or maybe you feel a little bit of nausea, or you're just not feeling good in the pit of your stomach. And ignoring that led me into a relationship, which until you're so far into it, and then you realize, how do I get out of this?
Mm-hmm.
And I was, rather than listening or trusting my experience and what my body was saying to me, I was using my head to override my intuition. Making either excuses, well, this is how I'm going to be honest. This is how my Oma and Opa's relationship was. They bickered. It's not a big deal. This is just kind of how it is. And they spent their whole lives together. So instead of listening to and trusting my gut, led me to stay in that relationship a little longer, until then I'm at the point where I can't get out. And then that person erodes my self-confidence and my own. Not only did I not feel safe in my own home, that was one thing, not feeling safe in my own home, but once that issue was taken care of, I had a whole nother obstacle to overcome, and that was finding that trust in myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because how did I let that happen? How could that occur? And it was it was a Kundalini Kriya. Imagine that really got me out of that space of the lack of self-confidence, the lack of self-trust. I felt then safe in my home, but I didn't feel safe in the home of my own body, of my own
Yes.
being. And so that is the impact of not listening to your intuition on the maybe more extreme end of the scale. But I think that's not a unique experience either. And whether it's something to that extreme, or maybe it isn't that extreme, but yeah, when you don't trust your intuition, it erodes trust in yourself. And for me, it was Nabi Kriya that got me through that, which really works on the solar plexus energy
Mm-hmm.
and rebuilds that sense of self and self-trust. So that was,
Yeah.
and it was very strange, because I remember being, in those days, going to work and just feeling so sick, and how am I going to get through every day? And I started practicing that Kriya, and I would just think, if I can just make it home. Said that the gut is the first brain.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where our mind, our thinking mind, often overrides our first brain, which is our gut. But there are other ways that some people are more sensing. It's more of just a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe for you, it's more of an audio. Uh, you hear something out of the blue, that in your own mind. Um, but yeah, oftentimes for me, it's a gut reaction, or just a general feeling. And like you said, we get those little messages all the time, and
Mm-hmm.
we chalk them up to other things, but that's the intuition. Slow down and take a breath, because those are little signs that, hey, maybe I need to take a few minutes before I leave the house.
Mm-hmm.
That, we get these signals to warn us, to protect us, um, to guide us down our right path.
Yes.
And when we tune those out, I can think of many occasions when when we tune those out, how that can lead to, yeah, again, unfavorable outcomes.
Right. Intuition is about the present moment, and it can also extend forward because it's timeless. So it's not really set in a particular, what we consider to be clock time, right? And what you just mentioned, there are uh, stories, anecdotes about people that they get delayed on a flight, or they get sent to a different flight because they need to change because of a schedule or whatever. and that plane didn't do well, the one that they were originally um, booked to fly on. And those things happen, and then people are awakened to the fact of, like, wow, that was a little bit more than just intuition. That was the universe guiding in an intuitive way to help people move from a situation that may be dangerous for them to one that is safe and comfortable. Our intuition can also bring us, um, well, we talk about somebody's vibe, maybe not so much now, but, in one day of a decade, that was a lot of language that we put around, like whether we liked someone's vibe or we didn't, or that vibe. And we had this language all around describing the vibes people had. They have this kind of vibe or that kind of vibe. And we would notice whether that vibe vibed with us, right? And what that meant. That isn't something we can touch.
Mhm.
We were trying to create language around it. Uh,
Mhm.
it's intuition. It's
Mm,
how we respond to others as well as how we respond to our inner truth, our soul.
exactly, exactly. There's that resonance that you
Mhm.
either, it's either resonance or dissonance. And if you, I guess in my experience again, so not, when I don't pay attention or I don't respond to the dissonance, it's an uncomfortable, it's just uncomfortable, whether that's in relationships or work or, whatever it is that I'm choosing. Redirection, not rejection. So
Yes.
I think sometimes we we get it comes down to attachment. Maybe we're attached to what we want or a particular outcome that we're looking for, and so we want to push through regardless of how it feels because our minds think that this is the way to do it. This is the only path I can see to get to what I want. And then we face rejection because oftentimes that's, the universe's way of saying, this isn't for you. But if we continue to push and take that as rejection instead of redirection, we may be missing what really is for us. And
Yeah.
I'm purely speaking through experience here.
Right.
So,
Right.
um, that, I we're never off the path, but I sure can push down a a pretty uncomfortable and through a pretty uncomfortable journey before I go, oh, maybe I should just go with the flow a little bit here
Right.
and
Yeah.
trust what I'm feeling over what I think,
Hmm.
heart over head. Our in our Western culture, it's very much head over heart. We
Yes,
trust
that's
the
true.
mind over everything, and it's a bit of a retraining process to trust the heart and the body, what you feel in your body over what your mind is saying.
Yes. And, it's interesting. You started our dialogue today with a description of a relationship. And one of the things that you said, and I would have to go back and see how quickly you said this, but I think it was in the first couple of sentences, that it didn't feel, and I'm using my words, it didn't feel right, or something felt off, but you went with it anyway because you were making excuses or um, compromising whatever needed to be compromised in order for that to happen. And we do this with karma, with our desires.
Mhm.
And that is the trap of karma, is that sometimes we see something, we want something, we desire it, we covet it to the point where we know it isn't good for us. Our intuition saying, not this time or maybe never, but we really, really want it because we're human. And we go with the human desire. And then we have consequences. We've created karma, which is another thing. And then suddenly we say, oh, maybe I just need to separate from this situation, whatever it is. It could even be something that we choose to do for ourselves that has nobody else involved, right? It's just for us. We're like, no, this isn't working. I need to need to redirect. I love that word, redirect.
Mhm.
And when we do, suddenly it's like this burden comes off and we can breathe. And what happens is we turn it back on ourselves and say, oh, the should word starts to pop up. I should have known sooner. I should have gone with my gut. I should have, and that's a whole nother phase of that separation that we all go through. But again, that's training our mind to listen to the intuition. So we almost have to go through some of that to let the mind know, well, this is a big deal. This was a thing that we probably needed to pay attention to. And the should word gives the mind that information about, well, maybe next time if I come into this circumstance and I feel the way I did at the beginning of this last one, I might choose a different, I will redirect. I'll choose a different way of going with it or not.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm. I just, you, self-compassion comes into play
Yes, it
because
does.
as you said, when that happens again, you'll choose differently. Well, guess what? Sometimes you don't.
Mm.
Because if I go back further, my first example happened pretty late in life. I was very young. Um, when I got married. A lot of people don't know I was married, and this is no shade to that time in my life or that person in my life, but I wasn't very connected with myself at that time, and I recall, feeling a type of way in my body, but my mind was making all of those rationalities that it does. And I remember going to a dress fitting and uh I was with my mom, and my mom just said, she's very intuitive herself, by the way, and
Mhm.
we're on different ends of the spectrum in our beliefs, but she's very intuitive. And she said, you don't have to do this. And inside my entire body, I just remember my entire body screaming, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. But my mind was like, it's that what sunk cost logical fallacy. I've
Mhm.
put this much time in. I've put this, there's
Right.
this much money into that. There's this much effort. Who all the people who are going to be disappointed or judged because of this or that. All that was flooding my mind. And so I just sat there calmly and I was like, let's do this. Completely against what my body was absolutely screaming. And that was part of my karma dharma path, my karmic lesson to learn. But I'm just going to be honest and say I didn't learn it in that sitting, and there were several other occasions that had to come up that were pretty drastic for me to finally learn that lesson, that it's okay for me to trust what my intuition is telling me, and not, I don't care what other people think about it. I don't care how I'm going to be judged on that. I don't care how it looks. When I know now at this point, when I hear my intuition and I listen to it, trust it, and act on it, I know I'm doing what is right for me, and all will be well in my world. And you know what? Other people are going to be fine too.
We talked a few episodes ago about the the programming, our cultural mores, and what happens as we grow up, and the expectations from our social environment, whatever that might be. And when you mentioned how you were screaming inside and not wanting to do this, and your mother basically was giving you permission to step out. We are caring individuals and we care about others. And immediately you mentioned all the others that would have been impacted by that. including the individual that you were going to marry, and the money and the time. And so I think part of what happens to us is that when we when we start with that time investment or financial investment and then promises, we aren't sure whether we are being of integrity if we choose something different along the way.
When if we're really open to receiving what's best for us, that can come in the most unexpected ways. And I learned that throughout my life
Mhm.
in many different ways and many different forms.
Sometimes, though, I think we have avoidance of intuition for other reasons, and that is that there is a quality of intuition that requires that we stand in our own power and that we are able to um, navigate uniquely in our way. And not everything that we learn growing up brings us into that way of thinking about living our lives and our dharma. Um, we need others around us. Uh, and we talked about that with the collective dharma and the collective karma. At the same time, being strong in our own unique way is how we contribute, how we participate. And we get bound up in judgment from others and self judgment and wanting to belong. We mentioned that along the way. And
Right.
it gets muddy. The Maya, the illusion, starts to enfold us, and uh, we end up giving away pieces of ourselves in order to receive something or belong or to be like others so that we're liked. And we then, I'll just say, rob the collective of our unique strengths and what we bring to the community, not even to mention what we bring to ourselves, because we've already given a bunch of those pieces away, right? So it's a really complex situation navigating the power that's within without the ego getting overinflated, and understanding that our intuition is really guiding us along the way, and at the same time having um, a broad scope and open ears to things going on around us in a way that we can contribute and at the same time receive. So intuition is very complex.
It
It's
is. It is.
very
I
complex.
I think we can tie this too back to the 10 bodies, or however you want to
Mm-hmm.
conceptualize us as a whole self-sensory human, system. Um, so you mentioned longing to belong, the negative mind.
Mm-hmm.
If our negative mind is out of balance, our longing to belong can become so strong that we compromise ourselves to be in situations that make us feel like we belong. Or devil or divine, the positive mind. If our positive mind is overdeveloped and we're not using the negative mind to discern what's good for us, all that we see could be so divine turns into literal hell on earth. So it's
Mm-hmm.
cultivating that neutral mind and coming to this space where we can take the minds, the active minds, the rajasic minds, a little bit out of play and tune in into those other more subtle aspects of ourselves, strengthening the aura, strengthening the arc line, to protect the heart, to protect our even our physical bodies, but creating that kind of protective layer
Mm-hmm.
that allows us to be more introspective, safe in introspecting in ourselves. So going inward, we're we want, sometimes I don't know if it's, just the way we're raised, we're used to being told what to do.
Sure.
Sometimes it's more comfortable. It takes away that level of personal responsibility and accountability just to, well, just tell me what to do. Um, and we do, and there's again, I know it's paradoxical. Surrender, but also, we have a personal responsibility to act in accordance with what is from that information that we're receiving,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
it does. And it triggers a memory for me that was a repetitive memory that I have, a voice of my mother, which we all have the voice of our mother. And she would say, when I was describing something intuitively, or making some kind of comment that was an intuitively based comment, even as a child, she'd say, don't you want to be normal?
Mm-hmm.
Don't you want to be normal? And if I was sitting somewhere and contemplating, obviously not reading a book or doing artwork or practicing my music or studying for something, I was, for all intents and purposes, not doing anything, just sitting, which was meditation, by the way. I had a word later that came to me for that as I grew up. And she would come over and say, you need to do something. What are you going to do? Don't you want to be normal? And so we have these things that come through based on our early environment or even later environments that you talked about that give us external messages about the validity and acceptance of others from our intuition. And that negating of intuition starts sometimes at a very early age. Some people grow up in an environment where that is the way they grow up, and it's encouraged to be nurtured and nourished and blooms wildly in lots of different ways. So we all have different backgrounds around intuition, and at some point we could be grateful, I am now, that I've come to the point where, for the most part, not always, as I mentioned, the coffee cup, right? Do I even take a look at those, what consider to be minor intuitive alerts? um, but we're learning, and that's part of the path.
Yeah, and as with everything, it is a ongoing process. And just when you think you've mastered it, a new lesson emerges, and the universe is like, oh, you think you got that intuition thing down? Let me throw this one at you. See, it's
Right.
wrapped just a little bit differently, and
Mhm.
you're going to think it's something else. So let's see how you do with this.
Right.
So it's that. And then we come back to the practices, which help us develop and constantly fine tune and hone those the self-sensory system so that we can perceive those more subtle energies more clearly.
Right.
You might see, and there might be one area of your life where, hey, you've really mastered that, and then bam, it'll hit you in another way.
Mhm.
So there's this lovely aspect of we're always continually learning and growing and shedding and unlearning, and we get to do it all over again. It can be maddening at times, which is why community is important because we
Yes.
can we can support each other through those moments, the times that are hard. And I recall, I had wanted to do that teacher training in Bali for years. It
Yeah, I
was on
remember
my
you
bucket
talking
list
about it.
for years.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember talking with you about it, and
Mm-hmm.
my whole gut was saying, "This is for you. Do it." And my mind, of course, was, "You're unemployed. You don't, how can you do this?" And all the things that didn't make sense. And um, it was through our conversation where it, again was brought to me, I'm my own biggest block. What would happen if I get out of my own way? What would happen if I just trust and open myself to that intuition? And there were so many karmic lessons that truly got burned up, like dissipated
Mhm.
and
Wonderful.
transformed into Dharma in that experience that I knew it was for me. So
Mhm.
it's that fun thing where we get to it's never ending, and sometimes it can get really frustrating and it's like, this again, do I have to go through this again? But we can support each other through that and help each other see see our way through.
Yeah. We're asking the question, who am I? And that's at the core of intuitive way of being. And you mentioned this story about going to Bali, and you said all these things, and I'm thinking logic, intuition.
Mhm.
Intuition can support logic, but logic is not supporting intuition. And so coming into a separation there to first find the intuition about it, whatever that is, and then go with that, and then let logic flow in and support that direction that intuition is calling us to take. So yeah, it can be they can be diametrically opposed to each other, especially if logic gets in the way, right?
It's again, it's that we live in a world of dichotomy,
Hmm.
and it's learning how to harmonize, to balance these aspects that both exist. They
Hmm.
that we can bring them in, we can approach them in a way that they can support each other and not be, um, they don't have to be in opposition all the time.
Yeah, yeah,
But yes, absolutely. The when I have found that it is my logical brain that needs to do a little bit of quieting to be able to receive what is meant for me
hmm,
and follow my intuition.
yeah. And each one of them can be stubborn.
Exactly.
Intuition can say, no, but, and now let's go. And logic is going, sorry, no, can't do. And then the other thing happens. Logic's like, I'm going this way. Intuition's pulling us at the gut, taking
Mhm.
us into screaming inside, I'm not doing this. You know? Yeah,
And just
yeah.
as in, it's important to go inward, but it's important to also, you can get that reflection back from others as well. So
Yes,
going inward isn't to say that relationship with others isn't important, or getting feedback or sound advice isn't important, but you also are responsible for discerning if that advice or that wisdom is meant for you.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with that. And sometimes intuition, because it's in a timeless form, it doesn't mean that it's right now. And
Mhm.
logic needs to help build the pathway so that intuition can take us on it in that direction. So, yeah, very
Yeah, I
interesting
love this.
dialogue. And,
Fun, complex, and we just sorted it all out. Look, now you know what to do every time, and you got this.
well, yeah, until, like you said, the universe says,
Until
try
next
this one
time.
on. Yeah,
Right.
because when we started this recording today, uh, we were comparing the fact that we had no notes.
Right.
We're and with that, thank you everyone for going with our spontaneous, intuitive episode today.
Yeah, it was a windy little journey, and
Yeah,
hopefully you found a few nuggets along the way.
yeah. Again, comment, Let us know what's happening in your lives intuitively. Maybe where you followed it, maybe where you didn't, what happened. And like and subscribe and ring the bell. I didn't mention that before, but remember to ring the bell so that you are notified as a subscriber. And it does not cost anything to subscribe. It's just pressing that subscribe button and it's done.
And join us next time.
Yeah.
Satnam.
Namaste.